Hi guys, this is Mr. Tan, and today we are looking at the UK copyright laws, and this really is based on statute of Annie in 1709, and the passing of the Copyright Act in 1911, and then the current Copyright Act, Designs and Patents Act in 1988. So the law gives, the creators of literature, dramatic, music, arts, sound recordings, broadcast films, and typological arrangements of published editions, rights to control the way in which their material may be used. So, really, what types of work, applies to copyright? Literary, song lyrics, manuscripts, manuals, computer programs, commercial documents, leaflets, newsletters, and articles, computer programs regulations in 1992 also extended the copyright of literature. So again, other things include dramatic in terms of plays and dance, musical, recordings and score, artistic, photography, painting, sculpture, architecture, technical drawings, diagrams, maps, logos, typological arrangements of published editions such as magazines, periodicals, sound recordings, which may be recordings of other copyright works, such as musicals and literature. And then you also have, it also applies to films, broadcasts, and cable programs as well. So when does the copyright occur? Copyright arises, whether an individual or company creates a work. A work is subject to copyright if it is regarded as original and must exhibit a degree of labour, skill, or judgment. So interpretation is related in the independent creation rather than the idea behind the creation. So for example, your idea for a book would not itself be protected, but the actual content of the book that you write would be protected. So names, titles, short phrases and colours are not really generally considered as unique or substantial enough to be covered by copyright, but a creation such as a logo that combines these elements may be. And when we look at who owns the copyright on a piece of work, normally the individual or collaborative who authorized the work will exclusively own the work and is referred to as the first owner or copyright under the 1988 Copyright Law Act. Designers and Patents Act. However, if a work is produced as part of an employment, then the first owner will normally be the company. That is, if the employer of the individual who created the work. Freelance or commissioned work will usually belong to the author of the work, unless there is an arrangement to the contrary. Just like any other asset, a copyright may be transferred or sold by the copyright owner to another party. Rights, cannot be claimed for any part of work, such as a copy taken from a previous work. For example, in a piece of musical featuring samples from a previous work, the copyright of the samples would still remain with the original author. Only the owner or its exclusive licensee can bring proceedings in the courts itself. Now, the next question is the duration of copyright. And according to the 1988 Copyright Design and Patents Act, it states that the duration for different elements will take different time periods. So for literary, dramatic, musical or artistic works, 70 years from the end of the calendar year in which the last remaining author of the work dies, or if the author is unknown, copyright will last for 70 years from end of the year in which the work was created. If it was made available to the public during that time, publication, authorized performance, broadcast, copyright will run for 70 years from the end of the first year that the work was first made available. If we are talking about sound recordings, then it's 50 years from the end of the calendar year in which the work was created, or if the work was published or otherwise made available to the public by the rights owner within that time period, and 70 years, from the end of that year that the work was first published or made available. If we're talking about films, then that is 70 years from the end of the calendar year in which the last principal director, author or composer dies. If the work is unknown, authorship, then 70 years from the end of the year of creation, or if made available to the public in that time, 70 years from the end of the first year of that film which was made available. Typological arrangements or published editions, we're talking about 25 years from the end of the calendar year in which the work was first published. If we're talking about broadcasts and cable programs, then we're talking about 50 years from the end of the calendar year in the first year which the broadcast was made. Now, when we're looking at Crown copyright will exist in works made by an officer of the Crown. This includes items such as legislation and documents and reports produced by government bodies. So Crown copyright will last for a period of 125 years from the end of the calendar year in which the work was first made. If the work was commercially published within 75 years at the end of the first year which it was made. And Crown copyright will last for 50 years from the end of the calendar year in which it was published. And then the last one we have is Parliamentary copyright. And Parliamentary copyright will apply to work that is made or under the direction or control of the House of Commons or the House of Lords, will last for 50 years from the end of the calendar year in which the work was first made. So we can see, according to the 1988 copyrights legislation, these are the time periods given. Section 6 of the Copyright Act 1988 looks at restrictions, and this includes restricting copying the work, renting, lending or issuing copies of the work to the public, performing, broadcasting or showing the work in public, or even adapting the work. And the author of a work or a director or copyright film may also have certain moral rights, including also the right to be identified as the author. Section 7 of the Data Protection Act 1988 looks at acts that do not infringe copyright. We're talking about here fair dealing. It's a term used to describe acts which are permitted to a certain degree, normally copies of part of a work, without infringing copyright. And these include private and research study purposes, performance copies or lending for educational purposes, criticism and news reporting for incidental inclusion, copies and lending by librarians, caricature, pastiche, acts for the purpose of royal commission, statutory inquiries, judicial proceedings and parliamentary purposes, recordings for broadcasts for the purpose of listening to or viewing at a more convenient time. This is known as time shifting, and producing a backup copy for personal use of a computer program. Finally, we have some useful addresses, which includes the Intellectual Property Office, Concept House, Cardiff Road, Newport, South Wales, MP10 8QQ, and you can contact them via 0300 300 2000, and it's at www.ipo.gov.uk. Also for music, you've got PRS for Music, 29 to 33 Burn Street, London, W1P 4AA, and you can contact them on 02075 805 544, and you can go to PRS www.prs formusic.com. And then finally you've got Copyright Licensing Agency, Saffron House, 6 to 10 Kirby Street, London, EC1N 8TS. You can contact them on 0207 400 3100, and you can also email them on. You can see some further information at www.cra.co.uk. So here is very useful if you want further information to contact these specialist places to see exactly how you go through the processes and the costs involved in terms of copyright.